The Storyteller presents The Unlucky Theatre by Elliot O. Donnell. Elliot O. Donnell, born 27 February 1872, died 8th May 1965, was an author known primarily for his books about ghosts. He claimed to have seen a ghost described as an elemental figure covered with spots when he was 5 years old. He also claimed to have been strangled by a mysterious phantom in Dublin. The Unlucky Theatre by Elliot O. Donnell. For many years, there was a theatre in London which was regarded as unlucky because for a very long time no play produced in it was a success. It was called the Mohawk and it had changed its name many a times, but none of the names brought it any good luck. Also, people believed that it was visited by ghosts, and this gave it an even worse name. When my friend Farnahan heard about this theatre, he was eager to spend a night there. He came from an old Irish family which had for many centuries taken an interest in the ways and habits of ghosts. He asked me if I knew who owned the theatre, and I told him that I believed the owner was Peter Lindsay. Farnahan soon went to see him and asked if he could keep watch in the theatre for a night. Lindsay agreed on condition that he did not tell the newspapers and that whatever happened was kept a secret. It was arranged that Farnahan would go to the stage door at 11 o'clock on a Monday night in June, and that he would be admitted when he rang 3 times. Farnahan was looking forward eagerly to the night, and at last it arrived. He went to the Mohawk at correct hour, rang the stage door bell 3 times, and was let in by the night watchman, John Ward. On this particular occasion, Ward was allowed to go home since Farnahan was taking his place. Ward showed him round the building, explained to him what to do if there was a fire, and left him alone in the theatre. The place seemed lonely, and after Ward had gone, there was an uncomfortable stillness. This was broken only by occasional noises such as one hears in old empty buildings at night. Farnahan had never imagined that a theatre could be so quiet. He wandered up and downstairs and along the passages on various floors, looked at the seating areas, and then went round behind the stage. The dust lay thick on the boards, and there were signs everywhere of lack of care and attention. Farnahan was looking at the remains of a large black insect and hoping that there were no more lives once around, when he heard a movement in the nearest dressing room. He slowly opened the dressing room door and looked in. A man was doing something to a stage sword. The man turned round and saw Farnahan. A guilty, surprised look appeared in his eyes, and since Ward had told him that there was nobody in the building, Farnahan asked him what he was doing there. There was something strange about the man. His clothes had been long out of fashion, and somehow He did not seem quite real. "Who are you?" Farnahan asked. "And what are you doing to that sword?" He took a step towards the man, who suddenly and without explanation melted away. This gave Farnahan a shock, but he gradually calmed himself, and although he was still rather shaken, he continued to wander round the dusty old place. When it was nearly 1 o'clock by his watch, he thought that it was time to have something to eat. So he sat below the stage, eating some cold chicken and drinking some hot coffee. When he was drinking, he had the feeling that someone was watching him. He looked around him and got such a shock that he almost dropped his cup. At the edge of the stage was a tall, graceful woman with dark hair and eyes. She was beautiful, but the paleness of her face was striking and very ghostly. She was looking anxiously around the theatre, and when she seemed satisfied that there was no cause for anxiety, she slipped silently across the stage and out of sight. Farnahan thought that he had had enough shocks and that he had better leave the Mohawk, because he certainly did not want to see a third ghost. But as he did not like to give up on anything, he stayed on. He looked slowly round the theatre. How lonely it seemed. What a feeling of sadness and emptiness surrounded it. There was no sign of life anywhere. He thought of the many feet that had stepped out onto the stage, of the attractive faces whose beautiful eyes and smiles had given pleasure to so many people. Where were those well-known actors and actresses now? Probably they were all dead and forgotten. He leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes and dreamed of the past. Suddenly, he heard voices. He opened his eyes and to his surprise, he was no longer alone. The seats were completely filled with people, dressed in a style of long ago. The house was full, but like the man in the dressing room, these people did not seem real. Their faces were as pale as those of the dead, and there was something unpleasantly inhuman about them. The woman whom Farnahan had seen on the edge of the stage was now seated alone in one of the more expensive seats in a box. She wore a rich evening dress of the kind that might have been fashionable in the early years of the 19th century. She was leaning forward and watching the stage with great attention. The musicians below the stage were playing an old tune which had once no doubt been popular, but which had since been forgotten. They stopped suddenly as the curtain rose. The scene was a wood in which two men were about to have a sword fight. One man was tall with fair hair and a beard, the other was dark. At a signal, they began to fight. There was an immediate silence in the theatre, which was broken only by the sharp noises of the fight. Farnahan looked up at the lady in the box, whose beauty held his attention. She was watching every sword stroke of the fighters with the greatest anxiety and excitement. Suddenly, the fair man's sword flashed forward and struck the dark man in the chest. He gave a long cry, took a few unsteady steps, and fell. There was a terrible cry from a girl who had been watching from behind a stage tree, and a joyful shout from the lady in the box. The curtain dropped. In a few moments it rose again, and Farnahan was shocked to see a row of skeletons in the clothes that they had probably worn in the play. The musicians and the people watching were all skeletons, and as their bony hands showed their approval, the actors smiled and then threw back their heads and burst into devilish laughter. The curtain fell, and the theatre was once again in darkness. Farnahan could not bear any more. He hurried out to the street. Peter Lindsay listened to Farnahan's account of his ghostly experiences in the Mohawk with great interest and told him that they might have been the result of an unfortunate event in the theatre in 1803. A play called The Watching Eyes was being performed at the Cascade, as the Mohawk was then named. Two leading actors were in it, Guy Lang and Raymond Ross. Ross was known to be very much in love with Mrs. Lang. She encouraged him and repeatedly told him that she hated her husband, who treated her badly. In the play, there was a fight between Lang and Ross, and one night, Ross killed Lang. The stage swords always had rubber buttons on their points, so that no one would be hurt. But on this occasion, the sword used by Ross had no buttons. It was always thought that Mrs. Lang was responsible and that she intended her lover Ross to kill Lang. It was never known for certain whether Ross knew about her intentions, and since his guilt could not be proved, he simply lost his job. Mrs. Lang married a man called Lord Donnell, whom she had known for some time. Because of the suspicion of the murder that was connected with it, the theatre was closed down, and when it opened again, it was no longer called the Cascade. From that time on, Lindsay said, people have claimed that there are ghosts in the theatre, and no play produced in it has ever been a success. It has cost me a lot of money and worry, and if I can't sell it, I will have it pulled down. But it was so well known for its ghosts and the bad luck it brought that he could not sell it. So he had it pulled down and sold the land on which it had stood. If you like the audio presentation, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.